Okay.
Oh, wait. Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting, August the 10th, 2021. I will entertain a resolution to exclude the public that in accordance with Ministerial Order M192, the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting be closed to the public due to the inability to meet physical distancing recommendations made under the Public Health Act in council chambers located at 8707 Main Street, and that to ensure openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability, the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meetings will be recorded, streamed, and published on the town's website. I have a motion. Thank you, Councillor Rhodes, Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you. Approval of the agenda and late items. Are there any late items, Mrs. Hilton? Thank you. So we need a motion, please, to approve the committee of the whole agenda for today. Councillor Bennett, Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you. And the adoption of some minutes. The committee of the whole minutes from July the 27th. We need someone to, thank you, move that. Councillor Rhodes, Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you. No business arising, and we do have a petition, petitions and delegations, the draft official community plan, and that is being presented by our Director of Planning, Ms. McKay, and Brittany Tuttle, Planner for Urban Systems. So welcome, and go ahead, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and it's obviously a great pleasure to be here today with the full, complete draft of the official community plan, and we'll ask Mrs. Hilson to start the presentation. And so yes, we're really pleased to, of course, to have Brittany Tuttle here from Urban Systems, and we've been working hard on updating some of the changes that were recommended first from council. Following which we did recirculate with the public, and we'll talk a little bit more during the presentation about what that looks like, and some of the key areas that people commented on. We did get some extensive comments from Interior Health, and that was well timed, let me just say that, because the comments from Tanya Osborne from Interior Health spoke predominantly around a heat alert response system, which we had talked briefly about previously. And given the events of the last couple of months here in the South Okanagan, obviously we have incorporated some comments on heat alert response system into the official community plan. And I'm going to ask that Brittany take the lead on this presentation, and then knowing me as well as you do, you know I will jump in when I see it's appropriate, and feel free, of course, to ask questions throughout the presentation.
Just one sec. Brian, can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
I can, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Gina. So yeah, thanks everyone for having me here today. I'm happy to be here and happy to be excited to be presenting the draft official community plan. So yeah, okay, because they can move to the agenda, but so we're not going to go in depth of the official community plan. Gina did that with you back in April, and we haven't made significant changes since the draft that you had received in April that Gina had presented. So we're just going to talk about the public review process that we hosted since April until now, and some of the key comments that arose during that process and what the revisions were that we made. And then we have a couple of items for discussion with you that we'll get to at the end there, and then we'll wrap up discussing what the next steps are for moving the OCP forward and hopefully getting it adopted. Okay, so first of all, a quick recap on the public engagement process. So you've seen all of this information before, but it's just a quick review. We did start engaging with the public, I guess, 2 years ago now, which is crazy how quickly time has went by. And in summer 2019, we did extensive amounts of engagement with the community just to hear about what they wish to see in the OCP, and we went out to numerous community events And then we also came back to the community in the fall that year as well with a workshop on some more detailed topics. And so if you can just keep going to the next slide there, Brianne. So here's some of the other events that we did in the fall as well. So we hosted some specific workshops, and then we hosted a large event at the Sonora Center to dive in on some more key sections of the OCP as well. Next slide. And then more recently, we hosted a public review of the draft OCP that was presented to council in April of 2021 this year. And so what we did was we posted the draft on the town's website from mid-May until the end of June. And we had a comment form on the website that asked members of the public to provide any sort of comments they have on each section of the OCP. And then they were also asked to rank each section of the OCP as well in terms of level of improvements that they thought were required. We also hosted 3 public presentations in early June that were on specific topics. So the first one was housing, health, and social equity. The second one was the local economy. And the third one was environment, parks, and green spaces. And we did record those public presentations as well, and they were available on the town's website for anyone to watch later who was unable to attend. So we unfortunately didn't receive a ton of comments back on the draft OCP. We received 9 forms back on the draft on the website that was available. And we had a total of 4 people attend the first 2 workshops and 3 people attend the last workshops. We're unsure how many people actually watched the recordings, but we're hoping that more people did than the number that attended. And then there was also a comment form available on the website for the public presentations as well for anyone who watched the video recordings, but we didn't receive any submissions on that.
I think one thing that's worth noting though is that the people that did participate were key stakeholder representatives in our community. So at the online format where we did the presentation, and then they were able to interact and ask questions, the people that participated were stakeholders and representatives of larger sectors, like Ms. Glazer was there from Destination Asus, and with represents, pardon me, from the downtown business groups, and so it was well represented by the people that attended.
Yeah.
And there were so many people at the meetings that were held at the Sonora
Correct.
Center that I'm sure they would have probably looked at it, and they probably are comfortable with where we're at this, and that's why they didn't respond. Let's hope that's
Yeah,
true.
let's hope that's the case. Okay, so moving into some of the key comments that we received. First, I'm going to talk about the key comments we received on the comment form that was on the website. So just the next slide after this too. So we asked the question, how many stars would you give the draft OCP? And so you'll see along the bottom the number of respondents there, and that aligns with the answer choice. So all but one person who responded to the survey thought that the OCP was more than okay. So we had 3 people thought it was okay, 3 people thought it was good, and 2 people thought it was excellent. So based on those responses, we're like feeling pretty good that most people think that the draft of the OCP was okay. So moving on to the next slide. Then we had asked them to rank each section of the OCP according to how many improvements they thought were necessary. So many improvements, some improvements, or little to no improvements. And you can see on the numbers there, most people thought that there was little to no improvements required, except for some improvements required for the community goals and policy section and for the implementation section. And some people did indicate that they were unsure, which is just that furthest column to the right there as well. Okay, so next slide. So some general comments and considerations that we received for the OCP is people wanted to see more focus on attraction of youth. So for example, potentially a post-secondary campus in SAUs. they wanted to see more focus on having a year-round economy and community, so more businesses and amenities that are open or activities that are open year-round. More park improvements, so some people were specific, things like outdoor exercise equipment and splash pads and more picnic tables. More active transportation improvements, so more trails and bike lanes, increased mode options such as e-scooters, and I'm going to get to that much later on in the presentation. People really want to make sure that we're collaborating with our neighbors with Sioux Indian bands, which is always great to see. Environmental hazard awareness and preparation was a top priority as well, and we're in the thick of wildfire season now, so it's very justified. The aquatic center, which we heard quite a bit previously, what came up again. And then there was one other comment actually, and that should be Wide Arts National Association, not WISE, that's a typo on my part there. But they're a new nonprofit organization that just opened up in the cities here earlier this year. And so they actually responded to the survey that we had posted online, and they said that they would love to collaborate with the town and help to improve the cultural and arts offerings in the community. So that was something that we just wanted to bring to your attention, is that you have this new nonprofit organization in the community who's really looking for opportunities to work with the town and improve the arts scene. So that was really great to hear as well. Okay, next slide. And then I just wanted to highlight a couple of positive comments for you that we heard in the survey. So the first one is that someone said, we can't wait to see what the potential outcome of this OCP is when it comes to the growth of our town. The draft OCP covers all the required notions and desires that our community needs to keep pace with the way that it is growing. And another individual said that it's very well composed and look forward to its implementation. So it was nice to receive some positive comments on the survey. Okay, next slide. So now I'll touch on the general comments that we received during the public presentations. So in the first presentation, which was on housing, health, and social equity, as I mentioned before, there was 4 people who attended this presentation, and one of those individuals was a representative from Interior Health, which was really great. So I'm going to touch on some of her comments as well, specifically, but first I'll talk about the comments that we received during this presentation. So short-term rentals came up quite a bit throughout all of the presentations, actually, but particularly during this one, because there was, of course, some concern about how can we balance making sure that we have enough housing for our seasonal short-term workers, but then also meeting the needs of the tourism economy, and also being able to provide enough long-term rental housing for the community. So that was a topic that came up continuously, I would say. In the vision statement, so actually, Brianna, if you just skip ahead one slide. So in the vision statement, there's a sentence at the beginning here. It says, in 2040, Osoyoos will be a connected and innovative small community. So there was some confusion about the word connected, and what does the word connected mean? We got that question a couple of times. And so I'm going to come back to this a little bit later in the presentation, because we did add some verbiage to try to create some clarity around what that word means. If you can just go back, thank you. As Gina mentioned, the need to address or implement some sort of heat alert response system in the community came up, and that's very relevant right now as it's going to get super hot again this week here. And then ensuring that we have lots of wayfinding signage and connections to outside of the community. So ensuring that those things are addressed too.
Can I just say one thing
Sure.
about the signage? You know, over the years, there's been different community groups and so on that have put up wonderful signage around town. And then within 6 months, the business sells or it moves or something, and then it's
Right.
outdated. And it's very hard to keep up with the changes
Yeah.
that happen along with that. So I get that that's a good plan, but it is difficult to keep up with.
Okay, and then so to talk about the comments that we received from Interior Health. So their top thing was that we create and implement a alert response system. They would also like us to ensure that we're focusing on the provision of housing that's not only affordable, but also housing that's safe and accessible, because sometimes you can have affordable housing, but it may not necessarily be accessible for everyone or safe as well. So we really emphasize that we be clear in the OCP on our direction about affordable housing. Also ensuring that seniors housing is accessible too. So that kind of goes into a similar category. They also emphasize that they would like to ensure that the town is really promoting the design of public amenities and infrastructure that adhere to universal accessible design principles. And so this is something that we had mentioned quite a bit in the OCP already, but they wanted to see it even further emphasized. And so I'm going to talk about this a little bit later about how we further address this to make sure that all of our infrastructure and amenities that are being newly integrated into the community or upgraded are accessible for everyone.
For the UAD, can you write that out like in a bracket, put the real names of it there? Because Joe Average would know what that is.
Yes, so we have the full definition of it in the OCP,
Okay.
and there's actually like a call out box
Okay,
that's
thank
all
you.
pretty and whatnot in there, yeah. And then they also mentioned that they would like to see the implementation plan strengthened in the OCP. They would like to see it more specific and actionable, and so we're going to talk about that later in the presentation as well.
Yes, Councillor Bennett.
Did they mention anything about PCN or urgent care clinics?
We did not mention anything about that in their comments, no, but I believe that we do have some direction in the OCP that speaks to
Yes.
prioritizing urgent care
Yeah, no, I
clinics.
seen that. I just was wondering, they were giving us all these comments. They want to comment on that, which is the main thing we need.
Right.
Right.
Well,
So that's just my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. What we found was people commented on what was missing mostly. And so, for example, the heat alert response system. So the fact that we already talked about urgent care in the OCP, it sort of didn't come up again, but that's a very good point. Although we did get some kudos from Ontario Health on that section too, so.
Okay, next slide, please. So Interior Health also mentioned that they would like to ensure that new residential units are being designed so that they're age friendly. So basically that means they're designed in a way that allows someone to live in their housing unit for the entire span of their life. So regardless if their health deteriorates or they end up having any sort of disabilities, they're still able to live in their unit because it has all of the proper facilities that they need. Interior Health also brought up housing for seasonal workers. They'd like to make sure that we're addressing that. They wanted to ensure that we're reducing impacts from new development on ground and surface water. And they would like us to require 2 or more sustainability principles to be provided in the development permit areas. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit later as well, but just a quick recap. So in the development permit areas right now, we're requiring any development permit that's issued for new development to require right now 1 or more sustainability principles. So that could include something like retention of stormwater on site through having some rain gardens or bioswales, incorporating energy efficiency elements into the design, so such as parking for or charging stations for electric vehicles. So Interior Health said, well, why not include 2 or more instead of 1 or more?
Yeah, and sort of, and also just to build on that thought, as part of our land use procedures bylaw update, we'll probably, well, we would recommend to council that we also include what we're going to call sustainability checklist, so that we have a number of items that people can include in their design that address sustainability principles. So we'll be talking a lot about that subject as we move through the zoning bylaw update and then the land use procedures bylaw update.
And then I believe the final thing that they had mentioned was that they want to ensure that any disturbances to environmentally sensitive areas that occur as a result of the development are restored to an enhanced ecological state. So not just the exact same state as what the sensitive area was in prior to being disturbed, but making it even better than before. Okay, so next slide. So then we had the economy workshop, and there was 4 people who attended this presentation, and their main concerns, again, were about short-term rentals, the use of the word connected in the vision statement that I mentioned before, and then the lack of housing for seasonal workers. And then at the last presentation, which was on parks, the environment, and green spaces, we had 3 people attend this one. And there was quite a bit of emphasis on the need for collaboration at a regional level in order to ensure that our environmental spaces are being protected and preserved properly. So collaborating with the RDOX and the city's Indian band to address that. They really wanted to ensure that any new walking trails that are provided in the town are accessible, and to ensure that we're enhancing our connectivity of our trails to key destinations and amenities that are within the community. Wayfinding and interpretive signage came up once again. And then there was also some interesting comment about how a lot of newcomers to the community are actually seeking information on how a still use is sustainable or a green community per se. So some people are reaching out to businesses asking, well, what type of takeout containers do you use? Are they compostable? Are we having paper bags instead of plastic bags, and some questions like that. So that was quite good to hear as well. Okay, so based on the feedback that we received, we made some key revisions. So I've grouped these together into some categories for our discussion. So first of all, I'm going to talk about housing. So as I mentioned before, there was a lot of talk about short-term rentals and the availability of housing for seasonal workers. And then also ensuring that we're providing housing that allows people to age in place. So first, to address the concern about impacts of short-term rentals on long-term rental housing, we updated some of the policies that we already had in the OCP, which are the community goals and policy section. And so we added in there, we already have in there saying that we want to consider establishing a policy to regulate short-term rentals as an option for tourist accommodations. But we added to that to ensure that long-term rental housing stock is protected, because this is a key priority for us. And this is something that we're going to address in more detail during the zoning bylaw update, but the OCP can provide direction for that. And so that's what the intent of these policies is. And then so for the next slide here, we have a more focus on thinking about the impacts of short-term rentals and the availability of housing for seasonal workers, particularly those in the tourism industry. So in the OCP, there's a section in the tourism commercial designation that says promote the following tourist commercial uses, and it lists multiple uses. So we added one in there saying affordable housing units for those working in the tourism industry. And something else to note that in the community goals and policy section, there's also some policies that encourage the provision of staff housing for agricultural and tourism workers, and it's encouraging those employers to provide housing for their workers.
So I just want to speak briefly about this particular policy because it's very important. Right now in the planning department, we're receiving a lot of inquiries about from hoteliers looking at possibly purchasing some of the older motel units in our community. And what they like to do is offer them in the winter for snowbirds and in the summer for their staff. So this is kind of departure from just being strictly, I mean, it's still kind of a commercial use, but this idea of having affordable housing units for those working in the tourism industry, it could provide that opportunity. So we're just, we'll be exploring that a little bit more as part of the zoning bylaw update again, so.
On paper, it sounds great, but how are you gonna kind of micromanage who's really staying in the facility?
Well, that isn't really our responsibility, right? That's the responsibility of the purchaser of the motel or hotel unit. if we have a residential / commercial zone that allows for that kind of use, then it'll be up to them to regulate it. The idea is it allows for both uses within the same facility.
But if I own the motel, I could technically rent it to whoever for the year or month, and you wouldn't be the wiser.
You could, yes, although technically now in the zoning bylaw, it says that you're not allowed to rent those for extended periods of time in the commercial zones.
No one would be the wiser.
Any rental greater than 30 days becomes residential tenancy instead of commercial use.
Correct.
Why can't I come here for 6 weeks?
Because you're out of money in 4.
Yeah.
Like the rest of us.
Depends on how it's priced too, right? You do
Right.
daily pricing
Yeah.
as opposed to
Well, I mean,
monthly.
it's valid, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just kind of interesting.
It is
Great,
a-
It's great on paper.
It's gonna be a big challenge.
It's gonna be a challenge for sure.
I think
But
that's a
most
good
of the
idea.
things that we come across in our communities, well, we're well aware are a challenge.
CJ had a question?
Certainly.
As we move beyond the OCP and we
Right.
get into the zoning changes that you're
Yeah.
talking about, will we consider it mandatory for commercial developments to provide accommodation within their development? I just like to comment, so many of the communities that are not suffering right now
Right.
from staff housing, to use a contemporary term, are ones that have always said, you know, you're gonna develop in our community, here's your plan
Right.
for your staff.
Right.
And we have not done that through development
Right.
processes for decades in our community. And now we're seeing the result of not doing that. Are we going to fold that into future development?
Certainly, Council Road. So that's a very good question. It's something we actually have briefly chatted about during other development proposals coming forward to council. You know, if we do see another big resort style development come before council, we most certainly be looking for them to include at least some on-site housing or secure housing in another location that's tied to that development. What we're finding though right now is, as you'll recall, the development proposals that are coming forward are residential. So we're not seeing a lot of large scale commercial developments that would require extensive staff housing. So, but it's a good point.
Well, the OCP is gonna carry us well into the future.
Absolutely.
We need to look towards that as well. So.
Absolutely.
Councilor Down.
I still think we're always gonna have the problem of, if you have a motel in the summertime, you can rent it out for 4 times you do in the winter. Just for somebody to buy a motel and say, I'm gonna make it into staff housing versus renting it out. That's gonna be a tough thing to ever get over.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Councillor Bennett, and that's certainly a good point. What we are finding right now is the inquiries that we're getting at the department when people are looking at redeveloping some of these motels and hotels that are quite old and dated, to tear them down and redevelop them. Sometimes it's cost prohibitive. First off, they have to adhere to larger setbacks from the lake. They actually have to adhere to the setbacks from the highway. They have to provide the on-site parking. They can only go up 4 stories. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of pluses to leaving it the way it is and using it for as long as they can, as long as it's still viable to operate it and, partly residential, partly commercial. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next 5 to 10 years.
It's a good comment.
To be fair, businesses cannot run their business efficiently if they don't have enough staff. So some of the businesses in town have purchased rental units and they rent them out to their staff. So a few of them have done that, and that would be the only way that they could actually retain staff. So it has to be the business looking at what's best for them too. So they need to be involved with this.
Right now, they would be in compliance then if they're not supposed to rent for more than 30 days.
That's true. So we don't know that they're doing that, do we?
That's what I just said in my earlier
Yeah.
statement.
What I'm suggesting is, we're having
Sure,
now
it
starting to
sounds
have
already.
inquiries, because you'll see, there's a lot of for sale signs up. So every time a for sale sign goes up, we get about 100 calls. Next door, between myself, Amy and Neil, are responding to those inquiries, and the inquiries are turning towards this mixed commercial tourism, rental, residential use, so. It's just an interesting,
Yeah, it is.
it's just another change, and which we'll continue to see over time. Thank you, Brittany.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so next slide, moving on to economic. Oh, actually, yeah, we didn't finish housing yet. Okay, sorry. So there was a comment, as I mentioned before, about providing housing that allows residents to age in place. So we added a couple of policies, one to the community goals and policy section on housing, as well as another one to the residential land use designation section. And so the first one speaks to promoting the development of accessible seniors housing to better support this demographic's ability to age in place. And then the second one speaks to encouraging new residential development to consider age-friendly principles in the design and construction of units.
Those are definitions of age in place. Does that mean wider doors or panels in the bathroom? What's the definition of? age
And
in
there's
place?
also definitions in the BC building code about that, about the width of hallways and turning radius in
Yeah.
bathrooms.
That's door handles, grab bars.
Lower light switches.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so economic prosperity. So as I mentioned previously, there was some interest in better focusing on the attraction of youth to the community. For example, such as a post-secondary campus in the cities. And so we thought that this was a good idea because it could allow for some extra economic opportunities for the town and better allow for having a more year-round economy here. So we added a policy to the economic prosperity section of the OCP that says encourage post-secondary institutions to locate satellite campuses in the cities as a means of drawing younger demographics to the community. Promote integration of such institutions with the local tourism and agricultural industries to generate new employment opportunities.
Do we have any zoning in place to allow campuses?
We do institutional zoning, certainly. Just to elaborate a little bit more on this came up also as part of the downtown planning process and continues to come up. One of the ideas is possibly a culinary school, because, you know, we have great restaurants here, and then the hotels and resorts. So it's an opportunity for someone to attend a culinary school and then get some training in a local restaurant, and maybe consider this their full-time opportunity to live in raise their children in our community.
So that was the key thing for the economic section. The other comments were mostly around short-term housing, short-term rentals and housing, which we addressed previously. So for environment, these are all the comments that I had mentioned to you that came up during the environment presentation. So moving forward on how we address these. So there was a comment about environmental hazard awareness and preparation, and we have a whole section in the OCP already that speaks to that. It's section 7I, hazard areas, flooding, steep slopes, and wildfire. So we didn't make any changes to that. Reducing impacts to ground and surface water from new developments. So in section 7G, which is the environment land use policy section, we added a policy that says ensure that development does not negatively impact the quality of surface and groundwater sources. So that will be applicable to all new development happening. And then we also added a couple of other policies to this section that speak to ensuring that any construction that may create an obstruction to the flow of a water course, ditch, drain, or sewer is prohibited. And that the cumulative impacts of site development over time be considered in order to ensure that any negative impacts on hydrology, surface and groundwater quality, and wildlife habitat are considered at the time of development. And then, so going back to this piece here that we had, oh, yes, Council Road, sorry.
Sorry, just jump in, CJ, sorry.
Okay, so the groundwater or the water situation as a whole, it's really good that we're addressing this and, you know, putting policies in place next for our community. Regrettably, so much of the negative effect of our water is upstream communities. Is there some way that we could put in there a technique to collaborate with these communities to stop negatively affecting us? And so that would be not only regional district communities, but as far north as Kelowna, because everything they do there has an effect on us. in this.
Right.
And to me, we're kind of missing that collaboration thing. I have the same issue with a development close to our community that's in the regional district. I'm never getting notified about anything and development going on without us even knowing it. Even development on our borders, where we share borders and that kind of thing. I know the Okanagan Basin Water Board is very proactive with that. I think sometimes we miss opportunities, and having it in our OCP might be a positive thing for us.
Well, those are very good comments. We do have some sections about collaboration with communities in the South Okanagan, about, you know, shared regional goals, et cetera. And also, of course, a regional growth strategy, but that only addresses sort of the RDOS area. But those are very good comments. So we do have, you know, working together with electoral area A and then the regional district, and then the greater South Okanagan area. But we don't, I'm not sure that we discussed anything with respect to
No.
across the border.
No, we don't, so
So,
I'm just making note
We
of that.
can certainly make sure we update that section. Thank you. That's a good point.
Mhm. Okay.
Did we miss one?
Just go back one. Thank
There
you.
it is.
Okay, so we did speak to this briefly before, but so what we did was this clause, number 0.5, sustainability of all DPAs is included in every single one of the development permit area guidelines. And so we just updated it. So it's at the bottom sentence there, it says these initiatives must include 2 or more of the following. We changed that from 1 to 2. So now they have to, when you're getting a development permit, you have to have 2 or more of some of those examples that we gave before. So incorporating stormwater retention, recycling facilities, energy efficient aspects, etc. when you're having a new development.
And we don't consider that onerous in the planning development department because we already require them to do on-site stormwater management, for example. So, you know, it's kind of reiteration of some of the stuff just to kind of drive it home, how important it is to our community.
Okay, thanks. And so as I had mentioned previously as well, there was a comment about ensuring that any disturbances to environmentally sensitive areas from development are restored. So those areas are restored to an enhanced ecological state. So we previously had policies that required this through the development permit area guidelines for environmentally sensitive development permit area and the hillside development permit area. However, it didn't require the area to be restored to an enhanced ecological state. It just required it to be restored. So we just added in phrasing to those already existing policies to say that it needs to be restored to an enhanced ecological state.
Can I just ask, or sort of says, when it's been impacted in the past, someone else has impacted it. Now I gotta do a development and I gotta repair his problem.
No, so it's only if you are impacting the lands under your development, then you need to restore to the previous ecological state that's enhanced to what it was prior to your disturbance of the area.
Just I read it different.
So should it say in the course of development rather than in the past?
Yeah, to me in the past, it sounds like someone else has made the problem and then you're fixing his problem. The way I interpret it.
We can rephrase it for sure.
We just change the one
Although-
word, take the past out.
Although it's interesting because if you're sitting at the ministries of forest lands, natural resources, operations and rural development, you would actually advise that that new owner is responsible in some cases to restore it to the previous state. So some of this is kind of building on or giving direction to people that are having to comply with provincial guidelines and policies too.
So those words.
So we
you
need to
should-
have a look at this.
So the words you just should mention, maybe they should be included in there.
Well, they're included in the RAR sections and the environmental sections. But that's a good point.
How did Interior Health get so involved with the environment?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Councillor King. Interior health and health organizations throughout British Columbia, well, not just BC, but the world, are more and more recognizing how the mental, the health of the environment impacts people's physical and mental health. So it's that's their underlying interest, is seeing that, that cyclical kind of events. Whereas if you're living in a poor environmental area and there poor air quality, poor water, etc., no green space to recreate in, that impacts your mental and physical health.
So every house should have a couple plants in it.
Absolutely. Does yours?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, next slide, please. That's the next slide. We can keep going. Thank you. Okay, and then so there was also mention about emphasizing the need for collaborating with other communities to protect and preserve the environment, and we have a couple of sections that speak to that. The Our Connection to the Valley and the Community Goals and Policy section, as well as the environment section of the OCP.
Have you ever seen the OIV's policies on the environment, or they have some type of policy? Have you ever sort of talked to them at all?
I have spoken with them. They do have their own policies and ideas.
I mean, they perceived as being the leaders on their environment, so I was just curious if, are we following them, or are we incorporating some of their thoughts?
That's a challenging question to answer.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So can I say that the Okanagan Basin Water Board is doing quite a large study together with the Okanagan.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
The ONA, because they have just come out with a water policy. Because they have a
Mhm.
whole bunch of different names for water depending on where it comes from, what it's used for, how it originated. So we're really paying attention to that issue now.
Thank you, Mayor.
The BWB, yeah.
Okay, active transportation. So there was a few comments here pertaining to that. So as I mentioned previously, the public would like to see more trails and more mode options, ensuring that there's connectivity in the community to key destinations and amenities, and improving wayfinding. And so these are all things that we had already addressed in the draft OCP. And you can see that there's policies in the sections on our local identity and quality of life, connectivity, and then there's a whole section on active transportation as well, where we have policies that speak to all of these things, including creating a wayfinding signage program in collaboration with the city's Indian band.
Do we have any negative comments on e-scooters?
We're gonna talk about e-scooters soon. We'll come back to that. Okay, and then so for parks and recreation, as I mentioned before, there was a whole slew of ideas that we received in terms of park improvements that the public would like to see in the community, as well as an aquatic center. And these are things that we had already addressed in the draft OCP in the parks and recreation section, particularly policy 7H21D, which speaks to establishing a parks development cost charges to fund parkland improvements. And then 7H21E, which explores the development of additional trails, off-leash dog parks, sports fields, courts, and playgrounds. And then 7H23E, which speaks to working together with the town of Oliver and the city's Indian Band to determine the feasibility of a regional aquatic center.
We look, as we improve the parks and you get more people using them, do we look at purchasing any more land around the parks for parking?
That's a good question, and that would be part of Parks and Recreation update. Rather than part,
It speaks to the number of acres of the
Right.
park as compared to population.
right, but not,
So you should keep pace with population growth.
right, but it doesn't speak specifically to parking. Is that,
And we're
is
gonna
that
be
Councillor
working on
King's
that,
question?
like, in the next few months or after this is over, that starts.
I'm hoping that Director Davis will be working on that.
I
as
realize
Director
that,
McKay is a
it's
full
supposed
plate.
to flow into place next.
Well, we can speak to the implementation section briefly if you like.
Well, we can get down to it when we get there.
There's quite a list of.
There's already a
bylaws
list,
that
and-
need to be
Yeah, it's just,
updated.
we've been
Just-
talking about updating it
Right.
for a year now, so I'm just trying to move it forward.
Right, so it is on the list.
Okay,
in
it's on the to-do list.
It's on the list, pardon me?
Next year, right?
It's on the next year list.
That's what I
We've been,
thought, next year.
yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that during budget.
I thank you.
You're welcome.
Budget next year.
Okay, and then I think this is the last sort of section of the comments and the revisions that we made. So we had some general comments on overall quality of life in a city. So enhancing accessibility in the design of public amenities and infrastructure, clarifying the use of the word connected in the vision statement, and addressing or incorporating a heat alert response system into the community. And so the first one is in regards to accessibility in the design of public realm amenities infrastructure. So sorry, next slide, thanks. So we had, as I mentioned before, we had quite a few policies in the OCP already that speak to implementing universal accessible design principles throughout the town, particularly in section 6A, local identity and quality of life, as well as in section 6C and 6D in regards to the design of sidewalks. So we just enhanced some of these sections to ensure that universal accessible design principles are included. So for example, in this policy in particular, we had in there encourage the development of multimodal trails and sidewalk routes in residential neighborhoods that connect residents to schools, public facilities, and parks. So we just added in to say the development of multimodal trails and sidewalk routes that adhere to universal accessible design principles.
Is that also in our downtown,
Yes,
this
Downtown.
update, this like this update?
that is in there already,
Okay.
universal design. I will double check on that, whether or not we use the same terminology.
Next slide.
I think Alan just applied for some funding to do some of this stuff, right?
Pick a holiday.
Jared applied for
Yeah.
active transportation,
Yeah,
implementation, more targeted plans.
Right,
That's-
and that would
That's
include
the
universal
policy
design.
statements.
Okay, and then we had a policy in there that says provide public amenities such as washrooms, water fountains, etc., to allow visitors to into the town center to linger comfortably. I believe that this actually comes right from the downtown revitalization plan. And it says ensure that these amenities are easy to locate, and then we added and are designed according to universal accessible design principles. And then one other one that says encourage the provision of amenities through density bonusing for residential development consisting of additional floor area, additional units per hectare, or other measures of density. Amenities may include but are not limited to, and then there's a whole list of what some of these amenities may be. And we've added a policy at the end of that list to say that we encourage these amenities to incorporate UAD principles where applicable.
Those are cherry season.
Is there ever been a health issue around water fountains, or has comments ever come up about that?
That's a good question, because I think there could
No.
be.
We didn't receive any comments
No.
on that specifically.
Okay, so then as I had mentioned before, there was some confusion around use of the word connected in the vision statement. So in section 2, the introduction of the OCP, that's where the vision statement for 2040 is stated. And it says in 2040, cities will be a connected and innovative small community. And so some people were questioning, well, what does connected actually mean? And we do have a whole section in the community goals and policies section of OCP, section 6C, connectivity, which speaks to what we're trying to achieve in terms of connectivity in a cities. And this is based on some of the direction that we received from the public during community engagement. And so that's outlined in that section 6C, citizen direction. And then the goal section of section 6C also speaks to like what we envision connectivity to look like. So for example, things like walkable neighborhoods, having trail roads, sidewalks, and transit that all provide easy access to amenities, just being able to ensure that people can get around easily throughout the community, and that things are close by to each other, so they're not having to travel far distances. And then connectivity also looks like ensuring that people feel connected to each other as well. And so that section of the OCP speaks to all of those things. And so what we did below the vision statement in section 2 of the OCP is we added some verbiage that says the policies outlined in this plan all seek to achieve this vision for the community. The concept of connectivity and how it can be achieved in a city is further discussed in section 6C. So anyone who reads the vision and is unclear about what that means, they can go right to that section of the OCP and hopefully receive some clarity.
Was there any thought of changing that word?
Not really. I mean, it's a good word in terms of what we're trying to achieve. I mean, connectivity kind of sums up all of the overarching goals. So in order to change it, we would have to make the vision statement a lot longer, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest changing that. I'd be
Yeah.
in favor of keeping it.
Yeah.
That explains it
That-
pretty well to me.
That's a very good question though, and it's interesting because we added the community goals and policies section in response to comments early on in the public engagement processes about being again connected to throughout the valley. That was sort of something important. People talked about how, why are we looking after our greenhouse gas emissions here when it's the whole valley, et cetera. So we kind of felt that word connected or connection and to weave that thread through the OCP was important. Thank you.
I think connected also means in terms of provincial things that have been on, being connected through the internet and being connected with telephone, the ability to be connected from one community to another. For instance, say Manning Park is not well connected to, so that also, that's what I think of first, because I've heard that so often in terms of, not just cars and bikes and stuff.
Good points. Thank you.
Okay, and then next slide speaks to the heat alert response system. So we added a section or a policy to section 6A of the OCP, which is the quality of life section, that says progress, and this verbiage is taken almost directly from what Interior Health Authority had recommended that we include in the OCP. And it says progress towards the development of a municipal heat alert and response system with the aim to mitigate the impacts of heat on human health.
So you may recall that we did sort of have a brief conversation about heat alert response system previously, and I did attend at Interior Health with other representatives from communities up and down the valley to talk about heat alert response systems, because at that time Interior Health had money to help us implement this program, and then the money was retracted. So it kind of didn't go any further. So at least to put it in the OCP here, it's kind of a place marker for when hopefully they have money and Councillor Rhodes.
Not to sound critical of their decision, but you know, every weather app that is available in Canada has a heat
Right.
sensitive alert system that anybody can go into. Sometimes these things are better. You know, can't get the thought out of my mind that perhaps they're downloading yet again another situation on us, and
Right.
you know my contempt for downloading.
No,
So I
no,
have to kind of,
Never heard it before.
yeah, I kind of have to bring it up. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes these situations are better, serve the community better coming from them rather than us, because they have a broader picture of the situation. And I hate to have a system in place in Asuias and have us get it wrong because we are not experts in it.
right, and those are very, very good points, Councillor Rhodes. And I think for our community, a heat alert response system could be as simple as pre-identifying cooling centers that we could open up, and maybe under what conditions we might open a cooling center to the public. So it could be as simple as that. And that's what they mean by response. So once that heat alert goes out, what is our response going to be? Are we going to identify that now is the time to open the Sonora Center, or let people in to the new pool for free, or what is it going to be, right? So
In retrospect, you heard me comment about downloading. That's the way I feel, and I think we need to sometime maybe just push back a little bit
It's a
when it comes to this.
good comments, thank you.
This is not part of the EOC, emergency.
It wouldn't necessarily be,
No, and
you wouldn't establish an ELC just because you're gonna have a heat event, but you might announce that you're opening a cooling center.
Right.
The alert part is gonna be the easy part for us. It's what response measures will we provide, and how will we get people to avail themselves of them? Seniors with mobility disabilities live in unair conditioned housing. How are we gonna know them and their need to come and get a bit of respite from heat? I agree 100%. It feels like downloading. This is a public health issue. And we're going back to the old days when local councils were responsible for public health. The RDOS is doing a transition for their emergency and the mass notification system from one software provider to one which is much more robust in November of this year, Voyant Alert. Hoping to have a conversation with them about us talking and using that program as well. It's depending upon the data people put in. You can geofence mass notifications to certain regions or areas. And we've been talking with them for years now about enhanced regional emergency management. So that would be one component. That would be the alert part, but then what and for who are we going to provide a response? Is going to be the challenge, but I agree. I looked at it. Oh, great.
So this came up at the regional district meeting last week, and I was telling the CAO about it. Civic Ready is one of the things that the RDOS has in place. It's more for the area, the rural areas. And I think the only municipality in the RDOS that has this is Karameas, but it's not working well, so they're changing to Voyant. And it's certainly going to be available for us to look at and other municipalities. So it might be a start. And I know that Councillor Rhodes will be attending the next RDOS meeting where there is something on the agenda about emergency health related things. So he's gonna earn his money this month.
Big money. Yeah,
I think you get free lunch though.
if you go there, they haven't been open for.
Oh, that's
We're
true.
not- I think they're starting in about September. They might be opening up.
They don't send it to your house. for
They
breakfast,
don't?
no.
What type of service is that? Okay, so that's it for the comments that we received during the public review period, but there was another revision that we made to the OCP on the topic of sand and gravel, and this wasn't brought up but this was something that we had flagged as something that needed further attention. So on map 11, which is this map shown on the screen here in the OCP, there's just one parcel in SOUs that is identified as having a potential for sand and gravel extraction. And this was identified as per a data set from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. And so that parcel is on Crown land, and they have identified that site as having future potential for sand and gravel extraction. However, if you look on map 10, you'll notice that that area is within an environmentally sensitive area. And so it's highly unlikely that that parcel will ever be used for sand and gravel. But however, the Local Government Act, Section 473, does require that in official community plans, we have statements and maps that show the location of deposits that have potential for future sand and gravel extraction. And so we are adhering to the requirements of the Local Government Act by showing, including this map in the official community plan, as well as including some policy statements that speak to this. And so in the industrial land use designation section, we have a few policies that speak to aggregate and mining resources. And we have revised them very slightly to better speak to the fact that it's unlikely that estates will ever have aggregate extraction activities happening within the town boundaries. And so the town will be relying on outside resources in the RDOS or in other nearby communities for sand and gravel. So we added in a policy that speaks to that. And we already had a policy in there that speaks to the fact that the parcel that's identified on the sand and gravel deposits map likely will never be used for aggregate extraction because it's in an environmentally sensitive area as identified on the environmentally sensitive areas map. Mouthful of words there. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention, that that section was revised slightly just for that particular reason.
And it still meets the requirements of the Local Government Act
Yes.
to do it this way, so
Yes.
So that section has
Yeah.
to stay
we
in.
checked it.
Yeah, if you don't have any, you simply don't have any, like,
We-
is the city of Duncan gonna have a gravel?
No,
pit?
and in fact, the city of Duncan did the same thing in their OCP as they identified outside areas for gravel extraction. And just so people understand what the point of that is, it has to do with construction of buildings, et cetera, and roads in your community. So that's why
Yeah.
So
you're
that
required to
section-
mention it.
That section has to stay in the law.
You have
It
to.
must stay in.
Yeah, you have to speak to it.
Yeah.
This makes sense, no?
Okay, some quick discussion items. We'll try to move along.
Yes, so e-scooters. So we actually have received one comment on these in the survey, but we thought that was worth bringing forward to council to hear your opinions on this. And so the comment that we received was, in recent years, bikes, scooters, and electric scooters are becoming very popular means of transportation. Consider adding dedicated lanes along major streets for these types of vehicles. So Gina had mentioned to me that there was not a lot of appetite for e-scooters during discussions on the downtown plan. And something that we did want to bring to your attention is that it is difficult to regulate e-scooters. And the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure is considering actually restricting e-scooters on the highway. And so this recommendation of adding dedicated lanes along major streets could pose a challenge for the town if you decided to permit them, because they wouldn't be able to go down Main Street or cross the bridge to get to the other side of the community. So it's something we just wanted to bring to your attention, and if you have any discussion or comments on this, we're opening it up for you.
Just notes, I walk on highways every day, and the amount of scooters and e-bikes and people, one-wheeler, two-wheelers, the scooter types, the electric bikes, they're going on there 20, 30 miles an hour.
Right.
And most of them are being very cautious, but you've always got those idiots that got to ride up on the sidewalk, even though there's a highway and big shoulder there. So I can see as we get more and more active transportation, you have more people, there's gonna be concern. Like I was in Fort Lauderdale, yeah, watch for your life, because they rent them there on the street, you just
Mhm.
put your credit card, like jump on it, leave it and go to the next place. They're everywhere, people are.
We have them in Kelowna now, the same
Yeah,
concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think what's gonna happen, if I may say, during the Jared Brownstein led active transportation planning project coming up next, and also our look at our Main Street improvements through to Cottonwood. I suspect that what's gonna happen is there's gonna be a lot more conversation about this. And about dedicated bike and e-scooter, whatever lanes on the highway, and or removing the parking on those sections of the highway and prohibiting them on sidewalks, and all kinds of conversations like that are gonna happen in the very near future.
Before we had all of these things, we of course have golf carts, and some places like Chase allows golf carts in their downtown area, but they don't have the highways. And so having looked after parades for many years, one of the things that we need, especially on Cherry Fiesta, is the use of golf carts for managing traffic and so on. And so what we are required to do, Festival Society, is go into ICBC and get licensed for the day to use those and pay insurance on them. And it's only on the sections of the highway that are closed for the parade. So it's something that we've sort of looked at before, but the problem is that we've got highways intersecting the town, and so it's very difficult to get those from A to B. CJ?
Oh, thanks. I would question even having this in our OCP.
Right, and we don't.
Yeah,
This is
And
just,
that's why, because, and I think that's really the comments we wanted to make today, is that if you do hear about this out there in the community, it is a conversation to have as some of those other future planning processes. And again, the Ministry of Transportation may do a lot of this for us, so,
just for information only.
yes. And like I say, in case the question comes up when you're out in the public, we like to make sure you've heard what we've heard, so. Okay, so this came up during a recent rezoning where I identified that this particular parcel of land over at Lake Shore and 51st and then the frontage road off of Highway 3 is in the current OCP, and the new OCP is as a commercial designation. And it is zoned M3. And you'll recall that we had a bit of a conversation about this, and then Jim brought up a great idea about leaving it as a general commercial and possibly including some light industrial uses in a new commercial zone. And I think that's actually a better way to go than to leave it and returning it to an industrial zone. Because it's our industrial designation, because that conjures up a lot of the uses that are allowed in the industrial zone and designations that we wouldn't necessarily want to see there. For example, what's happening there right now is the outdoor storage of recreational vehicles. And even though it is not in compliance with the zone, it has happened over time. And I think as part of the zoning bylaw update, we need to be cognizant of this area and what we think is going to be attractive as a gateway to our community. So I think we'll just leave it as a commercial, and everyone's okay with that. Okay, and over to Brittany. Oh,
All
right.
right, it just shows the.
Yeah.
designation. Okay, so then the last thing that we wanted to talk to you about today is the implementation plan, which is section 9 of the OCP. And so in the comments that we received by Interior Health Authority, they had recommended that we strengthen the implementation plan, and they provided the example of the implementation plan that the city of Kamloops has for their OCP. And so the city of Kamloops approach is having a completely separate document. So their CAM plan, as they call it, their OCP, implementation strategy is a document that lives outside of the OCP. So they can update it at any time that they wish to do so. They see it more as a living document. And so Interior Health recommended that the town consider doing something like that. There are a few things to note in terms of having a separate implementation strategy. So the first being that the Kamloops example is very prescriptive. And while you can update it over time, many of the items that they have outlined in there, and feel free to take a look at it at some point if you'd like to see it. It looks very much like a capital plan or a very specific strategic plan that outlines specific projects that need to be completed within very specific timelines, specific dates. And so we thought that might be too prescriptive for the town, where we live in a community where our needs are ever evolving and changing as we continue to grow, and we're responding to the different needs of the community. So having something like that could be a little bit too prescriptive. So we didn't change the implementation plan, but we wanted to bring that to your attention.
So on the note of the implementation plan, I'm just going to quickly read the list that we put in here. We have the land use procedures bylaw update. Again, we've talked about this. There should be no surprises to you all as we go through this. The wayfinding informational signage program, public art program. We've talked about this before. Housing strategy update as a follow-up to the findings of the 2020 housing needs report. Economic development plan or strategy that we work with Chamber of Commerce, Destination of Studios, Indian Band, RDOS. So that could be a simple plan or a larger plan, but that would be something we bring forward to have a more in-depth conversation about what council wants to see there. The zoning bylaw update, short-term rental policy, which we will talk about during the zoning bylaw update. That'll be a specific topic in the request for proposals. I've identified that as a specific topic. I'm also going to add Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw update to this because that is going to be part of that zoning bylaw update request for proposals that will be going out to in the fall. Infrastructure master plan, sewer, water, and roads, parks and trails master plan update, development cost charge bylaw update, and affordable housing reserve fund. So we're going to talk about the affordable housing reserve fund. It's a separate topic, and I'm going to give you some examples of what we mean by that. And then finally, and certainly not least of all important, is the idea of temporary use permits. Now, temporary use permits is not currently identified as an option within either our OCP or zoning bylaw, and it is required if we want to issue someone a temporary use permit. You need to identify the methodology by which you would allow people to apply for, and then council to consider issuance of a temporary use permit. So that's quite important, and I left it in the separate, we put it in a separate section on its own under the implementation. Please have a look at it because it's certainly important. We do get a lot of inquiries from people looking to do a particular project or a particular business for 1 to 3 year period. So I think that's it, except we're just going to quickly go through the next steps, and then we'll see you for first reading. Over to you, Brittany.
So can I ask
Sure.
a couple of things that I mentioned in an email?
Yes.
Do you want me to bring them up, or are they, because it has been mentioned? And
Right.
I'm just wondering how that.
That's a great point, Mayor McCordoff. So Mayor McCordoff asked us in an email about the definition of soft fruits, et cetera, and we did get clarification around that. So we're going to make some changes on those sections to reflect what's more accurate. And then Cia Chabot asked us about, pointed out 2 items, one specific to the floodplain mapping, which we received from OBWB. And so we will update that accordingly to some more accurate information that we've got through our drone flights that were carried out earlier in the year. And then the other one is about infrastructure outside of the town boundaries. And the question was, did we want to show infrastructure outside of the town boundaries? It is infrastructure that's provided by the town, sewer and water services in some cases. And I'm gonna confirm with Director Brownstein on that as well. I'm not sure.
And
if
their
it's-
report off also had a comment about the population.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
figure.
I'll let
Yeah.
Brittany speak to that.
So the 2016 census had indicated a population, I think, 5,065.
No, 5,085.
5,085, and then the federal government confirmed 18 months later or so that that figure was incorrect. So we're going to use the most recent number that the federal government.
So
had
it
confirmed.
was because we asked partly
Right.
because we were quite surprised at the jump. We had just realized that our high school might be closing and all of a sudden people were
Right.
planning to leave town and we have a huge jump in population,
Right.
which triggers from a 30% to a 70% payment for the RCMP. That was why we asked, and we had an official review done. It came back at 5,050. However, on the town website, in that area,
Uh-huh.
it says 5,065. I mean, they're all very close numbers. I just think we need to pick one and we all,
Right.
and we need to, and I mean, it's gonna change, isn't it? We just
You
done a
get the new
census.
number this fall.
I think we're gonna pick the 5065 number, because it is a number that I've heard outside of our website as well. But I agree with Counselor King. What's gonna be an eye opener, I think, for all of us is gonna be this new number.
So I'm fine with it. I want to be able to put the new number, whatever we choose, in the
In the
OCP,
yeah.
because right now we have 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
very confusing.
And there's actually a table in here that speaks to possible growth rates and the number of people, and I think we should take off the 2018 and the 2019, 2 columns at the top, because that's history. Okay, so make a point of that, and then very quickly, the next steps I'll be coming back to you August 24th, looking for first reading of the amending bylaw. At that time, I will identify the areas that we just spoke about that will be updated. And then we need to do the referral and the legal review. I just wanted to touch base on that referral because it is a very important part of the process. One of the items that we identified is a possible connection from 56th up to 45th for a new interchange at the highway there. So when we refer this to the Ministry of Transportation and the Agricultural Land Commission, we'll make sure that we identify why that connectivity is shown in the OCP, why it's a draft, and that we're getting a lot of pressure for development on Lakeshore Drive. We'll be seeing other development proposals coming forward in the near future in that area, and the same issue comes up each and every time. What are we going to do about traffic? What are we going to do about moving goods and services and people in and out of their cars around that area? So that referral process is very, very important. We're targeting a second reading date of October 26th and early November for a public hearing. Anything else you wanted to add about that, Brittany, at this point?
That's all.
We want to adopt before the end of this year. That is our goal.
That's a good goal to have.
Thank you very much for your time, and
Thank
it was
you.
lengthy, we know, but there was a lot of information. We've been doing a lot of work since we last sat and had a conversation like this. So,
So thank you very much, Ms. McKay and Ms. Tuttle. We appreciate the taking all the information that you've been receiving and addressing it. So thank you.
thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Sorry, Brian, did you have a question? Oh, sorry, Myers thought you did. Okay, fair enough. So thank you very much, and we will move on to the next topic then. Next, we have staff reports, and first we have the corporate services quarterly report. Mrs. Hilson.
Thank you.
The Corporate Services Department encompasses legislative responsibilities for the corporate officer under the community charter, main reception duties, land issues, human resources, victim services, transit, insurance, contract administration, leases, and records management. So during the second quarter, which was April 1st to June 30th, 9 bylaws were adopted and 2 bylaws were abandoned. Bylaws of note would have been the business license amendment bylaw that was adopted, and that allowed the food trailers on private properties in the C1, C2, and C3 zones. The tax rate bylaw was adopted. Zoning amendment bylaw 285, 127 was adopted. And also the official community plan 1233, which was including 10129 74th with urban growth boundary. There was 2 policies adopted, the street food vendor selection approval policy and the proclamations policy. And council meetings were still closed to the public due to the inability for physical distancing. However, we did continue to live stream and publish our council meetings on the town's YouTube channel, and regular open meetings are also live streamed on Eastland's community channel. There was also, I have in my report, if the public is interested, the number of minutes council meetings were and the number of resolutions. We did host 1 virtual public hearing for zoning amendment 1085-134. There were 60 members of the public who participated virtually and 112 written submissions. The Corporate Services Department received 3 FOI requests in the second quarter, which was down from the first quarter where 7 were received. All FOI requests have been responded to and completed. The reception, you can see the stats for April, May, and June, and this was up from the first quarter. Town Hall also changed the hours that it was open to the public as of June 7th. So Town Hall is now open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday, which excludes the statutory holidays. The Corporate Services Admin Support is assisted with the Financial Services Department throughout the property tax season. And they saw a significant increase of inquiries on the changes due to the homeowner grant change. Corporate Service Admin Support also supports the bylaw enforcement officer and processing NTIs. And so there's an increase of number of tickets during the summer months, and that's mainly due to boat trailer park. For records management, the Corporate Services Admin Support finished scanning all town bylaws into our electronic record system. So now we have electronic copies of all bylaws since the creation of the town. So we are now going to start scanning our minutes into the electronic management system. And for land issues, council approved the license to use with Wine Country Racing, as well as the Swiss Traditional Archery School for a 3-year term. And then there were 2 licenses to use with the airport for a Swiss Model Aviation Club and PenMet. At the regular open meeting, council also approved the alternative approval process for 8 properties, 5 on 87th Street and 3 on 45th, which closed yesterday. As for human resources, quite a bit of staff time has been on human resource matters. During the second quarter, there were 15 positions advertised and 11 were filled. The deputy corporate officer was promoted to the director of corporate services effective June 1st, and Corey Courtmeyer started as the new fire chief for the town of Osoyoos on June 7th. And he comes from Elkford, where he served as the fire chief for the past 8 years. Victim services, rather than the percentage, she did the calls for service this time. She said, even though it looks low, she said they are quite busy with those case number loads. And the 2021-2022 funding agreement with the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Branch for Victim Services was signed as of April of 2021. Transit, BC Transit is conducting their stakeholder engagement in the upcoming months. Insurance, in the second quarter, the town received 2 liability claims. One has been forwarded to MIABC, contract administration, the information sharing agreement between the town and ICBC was renewed for another 2 years. So this agreement allows us to run vehicle license plates, i.e. at the boat trailer parking lot, when they don't secure permit. Leases, the council approved the lease with SunWest Investment Corporation to operate at the Desert Sunrise Marina. So it's a 3-year term with a rate of $8,000 per year. And the chief administrative officer signed a 4-month lease agreement with the property owner at 7808 Spartan Drive. And so we use this land for a day use boat trailer parking lot. And so that was at a rate of $4,000 for the term. And so currently the corporate service department consists of the director of corporate services and the corporate service admin support. And we've been busy answering customer inquiries and responding to complaints, working on leases agreements, human resource matters, regulatory bylaws, and working with other departments in there.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Elson. Sounds like you've been busy. Thank you for your report. Any questions? No, good. Okay, could we have the Mr. Backel, the financial services report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Cordo. So for the finance, attached the income statements to the June 30th for the town of Suez. Good news, we're projecting surpluses in our general fund of $562,500. In our sewer fund, we're projecting a surplus of $88,000. In our water fund, we're projecting a surplus of $65,000. For the Sun Bowl Arena, the attached income statement as well for June 30th. We're projecting a small surplus of $5,200 amount. And I'll just go into the details just so that the council's aware. And that's under our cemetery fund. Currently, revenues are slightly under 2020 by $460. This is currently under budget by $9,940 and projected to be $8,000 under budget. For licenses, permits, and rentals, business license revenues are up significantly from 2020, projecting a $7,000 surplus. Boat trailer parking revenues are up by $1,500 for 2020. We've got revenues for miscellaneous are up $43,800 from 2020, and we're projecting a surplus of $20,000 in this. Under solid waste management, revenues are up $127,730 from 2020. We've got a current surplus of $193,460 with a projected surplus of $30,000. This is our landfill tipping fees, our garbage collection fees that we do through our property taxes. Under development and building services, revenues are significantly up from 2020 by $137,300. Current surplus of $94,341 and projecting a surplus of $40,000. Under our investment income and donations, revenues are down by $22,850 from 2020, but we're still projecting the surplus because of term investments maturing in October of $200,000. Under our community services facility rentals, revenues are up $14,730 from 2020. We have a current deficit of $2,950, and this is projected to be on budget. So the good news story there was we were renting out the SMART Center for the vaccine clinic. So that's where the significant amount of revenues have come in. Under community services program revenues are up by $12,190 for 2020. There's current deficit of $15,640, and this is projected to be on budget. Under our unconditional transfers from governments, our municipal grant is received in July, and this is projected to be on budget. Conditional transfers from governments, RMI funding has been or being received in August this year, and this is also projected to be on budget. So borrowing transfers from own funds, all accounts related to capital expenditures projected to be on budget. For our expenditures for general legislative expenditures are up $1,210 in 2020, currently under budget by $6,820 and projected a budget surplus of $5,000. Under our administrative expenditures are down $45,250 from 2020, currently under budget by $86,550 and projecting a budget surplus of $50,000 due to staff vacancies for the Director of Corporate Services and the hiring of the executive assistant positions in April. Under civic buildings, our expenditures are consistent with 2020, current budget surplus of $5,430 and projected to be on budget. Under our general government data processing, our expenditures are up $4,960 from 2020. Current deficit is $16,770, but this is projected to be on budget. General government insurance expenditures are slightly down from 2020, and we're projecting a budget surplus of $25,000. And this is mainly due to our ICBC rebate that we received for the change of how they're doing business. Under general government travel, expenditures are up $3,760 from 2020. They have a current budget surplus of $7,820 and projecting a budget surplus of $8,000. Under municipal event celebrations, expenditures are up $5,550 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $8,900 and is projected to be on budget. For our grants issued, grants are all projected to be on budget. Our public works building expenditures up $15,020 from 2020. It has a current budget deficit of $6,800, but this is also projected to be on budget. For our old shop building, expenditures are down $1,540 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $3,570 and projected to be on budget. For protective services for the fire department, expenditures are up $53,570 from 2020. This is mostly due to training. Current budget surplus of $117,800 and it's projected to be on budget. Under protective services for policing, expenditures are consistent with 2020. Has a current budget surplus of $334,330, but this is projected to be on budget. The invoices for policing come in significantly later, so that's where there's a delay in that. Under protective services, animal control, expenditures are consistent with 2020. Current budget surplus of $32,160 and projecting a budget surplus of $30,000. This is mainly due to the delay in hiring bylaw enforcement during the year. So under community development, expenditures are down $6,890 from 2020. They have a current budget surplus of $48,210, and this got a projected budget surplus of $50,000. Under protective services, building inspection and development, our expenditures are actually down by $20,510 from 2020. We have a current budget surplus of $50,200 and projecting a budget surplus of $50,000. And this is mainly due to us not filling the additional planning position that we're still in the works of hiring. Under protective services joint safety committee, expenditures are up $320 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $9,320 and projected to be on budget. Under transportation engineering services, expenditures are up $2,310 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $2,040 and projected to be on budget. Transportation general equipment, expenditures are up $37,670 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $49,240 and projected to be on budget. We have our mechanic that's been here all year. He's been catching up with a lot of the things that were needing to be done there. Under transportation storm drains, expenditures are up $3,100 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $10,870 and projected to be on budget. Under traffic signs, expenditures are down $1,420 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $400 and projected to be on budget. Road marking expenditures are up $6,830 from 2020. Current budget deficit of $5,860 and projected to be on budget. Under transportation road maintenance, expenditures are up $6,140 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $1,530 and projected to be on budget. For sidewalk maintenance, expenditures are up $3,700 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $4,670 and projected to be on budget. Snow removal expenditures were down $15,780 from 2020. We have a current budget surplus of $6,740 and that's projected to be on budget. For transportation street lighting, expenditures up $2,670 from 2020. Current budget surplus of $9,770 and projected to be on budget. For airport, expenditures are consistent with 2020, and this is also projected to be on budget. Environmental health and garbage expenditures are up $91,080 from 2020. Still has a current budget surplus of $125,220, and this is projected to be on budget. For town cleanup is projected to be on budget. Under health and welfare for cemetery, expenditures are up slightly $4,580 from 2020, has a current budget surplus of $5,120, and this is projected to be on budget. Under community services desert park, expenditures consistent with 2020, current budget surplus is $730 and projected to be on budget. Under Sonora Center, expenditures are down just slightly at $660. Current budget surplus of $8,570 and projected to be on budget. Under other expenditures for community services, these expenditures are down $4,800 from 2020. Current budget surplus is $7,300 and projected to be on budget. Under community service fields, this expenditures are down $1,330. Current budget surplus of $4,480 and projected to be on budget. Under community services, wages and instructors, expenditures are up $9,800 in 2020. Current budget of $63,540, and this is also projected to be on budget. Under public works building museum, expenditures are consistent with 2020, and this is projected to be on budget. For parks, expenditures are up $12,780 in 2020. We have a current budget surplus of $13,370, and this is projected to be on budget. For weather station, we are projecting a surplus of $500. Under spraying, expenditures up $400 from 2020, current budget surplus of $11,930, and projecting a budget surplus of $5,000. For tree pruning, expenditures down $1,570 from 2020, projecting to be on budget. Emergency preparedness, expenditures are up slightly at $370 for 2020, and this is projected to be on budget. For ESS, expenditures are consistent with 2020, and this is projected to be on budget. For our general debt, expenditures are consistent with 2020 and projected to be on budget. Transfers of taxes to other governments, these transactions are done in August, and that's projected to be on budget. For contingencies, we're projecting a budget surplus of $50,000. Capital expenditures, capital projects are all expected to be on budget and are being worked on. For sewer revenues projected to have a surplus for 2021 of $38,000. Under capital revenue for pending grant funding opportunity. So the capital project is contingent on us receiving this grant. Projected to be on budget but subject to capital projects, and that's for our transfers from reserves. Under sewer expenditures are down $82,870 from 2020. We have a current surplus of $140,340, and then we have a projected surplus of $50,000. Under our sewer debt, expenditures are also consistent with 2020 and projected to be on budget. So under water revenues, we are projecting a small surplus of $4,000 in the water district funds. Under town water funds, we're projecting a surplus of $21,000. And under capital revenues, this is projected to be on budget and subject to capital expenditures. So water district expenditures are up $48,990 in 2020. Current budget surplus of $92,800 and projecting a surplus of $20,000. Under town water, expenditures are consistent with 2020. Current budget surplus of $28,680 and projected surplus of $20,000. And likewise, water debt expenditures are consistent with 2020. For our sewer or for our Sun Bowl Arena, I have to apologize to council. My vision has been a little bit suspect in the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to get that fixed. So I'm having trouble reading it. So please bear with me. So skating revenues are slightly down from 2021. Revenue shortfall of $3,000. We've got hockey revenues are down by $7,200 from 2020. projecting a revenue shortfall of $15,000. Under the maintenance contribution, this is on budget, this is a current club contribution. Other rink revenue, projecting a revenue shortfall of $4,000. Activities are supposed to be starting up in August. Advertising, revenue slightly down from 2021, projecting a revenue shortfall of $800. Under our contributions, on budget, requisition is usually received in August. For wages and benefits, wages are on budget and projected to be on budget. We've got our power for the arena expenditures are down $4,500 in 2020, currently $8,500 under budget and projecting to be $4,000 under budget. Under membership dues and fees, expenditures down $1,500 in 2020, currently $2,200 under budget and projecting to be on budget. We've got our admin expenses, expenditures are up $2,280 in 2020 as liability insurance applied to the Sunville Arena in June. Currently $5,850 under budget and projected to be on budget. Building repairs, maintenance expenses, expenditures are down $19,100 from 2020. Currently $34,400 under budget. And due to the delay in ordering the ice resurfacer and pickup truck, we're projecting a surplus of $20,000. And the capital expenditures are on budget. So are there any questions regarding any of the town's surpluses or deficits? Or proceed?
I have a question about number one, interior health. How long do you think that, do they have a contract with the Sonora Center? And do you see that continuing? Because you said that was providing some income there.
Yes, so the Interior Health has provided or given us notice that they will be closing down, but I believe we still have about a month approximately.
We're gonna find that report. Gerald told me when they're vacant. I think it's soon. Actually, it's in the next-
Yeah, they were gonna go out, but they wanted to keep it committed to, so it'll probably be vacant, but they'll be renting it.
The last minute date will be August the 16th, and then they're gonna relocate to the health center.
Okay,
But they also wanted to keep control of that till I believe the end of August.
Yeah, he doesn't
Okay.
talk about how
He
long
does.
they'll continue to rent. But, clinics are moving after August 16th.
well, I was there yesterday at the clinic and I cannot believe how many people were coming in. Don't know whether it was their first or second shot, but it was busy. So I'm glad they are opening it up. And the second question I had is, you mentioned that there were 7 FOI requests in the second quarter. And I'm just wondering, how do you budget for that? Because there's obviously a cost for FOI requests. Where does that money come from and how do you figure it out?
It's basically out of our daily activities, so it becomes part of our work environment.
Okay,
So
so it's not considered as a separate issue. Yeah,
my 7 FOI requests that I did were all for one individual.
yes. Okay, thank you.
So bylaws, we've got the Osceola tax rates bylaw 1372 was adopted April 27th. And that was to establish our 2021 property tax mill rates. The recreation fees and services charges bylaw 1180. The rates were adjusted as per the bylaw effective June 1st by CPI, and that was a 2.8% increase. And likewise, under pending tax sale properties, at the start of 2021, we had a total of 25 pending tax sale properties. There's currently 6 properties that remain in tax sale position at this time. Advertisements will be published in the US Times during the September 16th and 23rd issues if they remain in a tax sale position. And the tax sale will be conducted on September 27th, 2021 at 10 a.m. We're trying to do our due diligence to get a hold of the property owners to try to get the outstanding amounts paid up in time.
That's usually what happens, isn't it? It usually, they're paid sort of at the last minute and
Yes.
how
some of them-
often do we ever have to go to a tax sale?
I've been fortunate that we haven't had to conduct one here while I've been here. I don't have that comfort level this year. I do believe there's 2 property owners that we are having trouble trying to contact.
Okay.
So, you know, the potential is there for these. And as long as they remain outstanding, they're in a pending tax sale position, so we'll proceed, we'll do our due diligence. I'll also be bringing a report to council in the near future to explain the details of each of the pending tax sale properties. So the council is aware what our responsibilities are as well. Does council have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Zacco? No? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Zacco, for keeping tabs on all of that.
I'd like to again thank all of staff for their due diligence, trying to keep costs down where they can. It's tough in some situations, but I truly believe that they're doing a good job on that.
Good. Glad to hear that. Okay, thanks, Mr. Zacco.
Thank you.
Mr. Brownstein. The report. Operational services.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a short and sweet one. Just a quick update from operational services. Did some quick number crunching in regards to water consumption compared to 2020, regarding with our domestic system as well as our agricultural system. Domestic system demand is up by 23% over 2020. Pump run times have increased dramatically over the last month and a half. Especially become a little bit of a worry for us, but so far everything's been operating within parameters, everything else. But yeah, we have seen an increased consumption with all the dry weather and hot weather. Even with the change in water restrictions to stage 1, we did not see any dramatic decrease in demand that we were hoping for. Whether that's happening, it's dry and hot weather continues, we'll look to increase those water restrictions further and try to bring our demands down to where we're manageable. Again, with the irrigation system, it's not quite as influenced as much by weather and etc. We saw an 11% increase over 2020. Most agriculture irrigation continues in their state, no matter what the weather is doing. They're constantly pumping water off the ground. So one of the big things we're working on right now is occupational health and safety concerns that were brought to our attention by WorkSafe BC. They came in and did an inspection of our chlorination systems and our transportation chlorination. And subsequently, we had 11 orders written against the municipality in regards to non-compliance with WorkSafe regulations. Some of those orders were fairly easily dealt with. They were administrative or policy driven, which we corrected. Other ones have some significant financial implications to one, the water system and the wastewater system. We have engaged an engineering consultant to assist with some of these concerns raised by WorkSafe. It's probably going to entail some major ventilation upgrades at some of our stations and some process changes. So we'll keep you apprised, and that'll be coming back to council as part of the 2022 budget process. So, we just started tracking our service requests. So the department is now keeping track of how many times we're getting calls to do that, this, that, and the other thing, whether it be from the public or being from internal sources. So far in the second quarter, we've had 151 service requests for anything from a new water service to the trees, needs to be trimmed, to a pothole, to this, that, and other thing. We're going to try to keep track of this on a more regular basis, try to do comparisons over the year, from year to year, and just try to understand where our time is spent, going which way and every way. Capital programs, we continue to have a lot of capital infrastructure going on the ground. So broke out some of the major players. Vedette Drive is substantially complete. Bayview wastewater pump station is substantially complete. Rural domestic system to the south is 70% complete. They are to the point that most of the system has been pressure tested and bacteriologically tested. They're tying it into some of the sections. making the system whole. They're continuing with servicing, putting in meter pits, etc. And I believe the higher density residential area will be tied in probably within the next month. So you'll be off the irrigation system. Wastewater treatment lagoons, the desludging of cell 1 and cell 2, that is 75% complete. So they've come in and they've desludged cell 1. We actually took out, we were anticipating about 200 cubic meters. We took out 500. So a little more waste sitting at the bottom of that than we thought. The aerators were all serviced again for both cell 1 and cell 2. Cell 2 will be serviced again in the fall, just to make sure that all our ragging issues and everything else has been dealt with. We have seen a reduction in phone calls in regards to odor from lagoons and our wastewater system in general. So I'm hoping that the maintenance we've done up there, as well as some of the additional chemical injections we're doing on our distribution system is helping with the odors.
So everybody smelling smoke.
Yeah, that.
Could be that too. Everybody's keeping their windows closed.
Yeah,
The demo of the old main wastewater pump station was postponed due to no bidders. We may look at tying that into Legion Beach construction to raise the bar and provide a little bit more of a scope for these guys to bid on this. Solis Lake water main crossing, that was tendered, and the tender closing was extended to, I believe, next week. Due to some, I believe, with some design discussion with contractors. So I'm hoping we can see some bids on that. Landfill scale, we continue to progress with that. The office trailer has been ordered. We will be releasing an RFP here shortly for the site works and et cetera to get the new scale installed. Main Street continues. We have the survey out to the public, asking for input in regards to parking, landscaping, trees, that kind of stuff. There has been some initial feedback in regards to the change from angle parking to parallel parking, and it hasn't been very positive, but we'll hope by the end of it we get some really good feedback and see where the community's thought process is on that one. 85th Street, it is complete. It's been up and running now for 2 months now. What feedback we have has been very positive. So again, we'll continue to get feedback on that. The survey is live for the community to tell us what they think, what they see for change, what they see for permanent structure. And Legion Beach washroom design is 75% complete. I am waiting to bring that back to council until such time we have confirmation for provincial funding in regards to what we can and cannot do down there before I bring any design documents to council.
thank you very much. Go ahead, Councilor Rhodes.
Yeah, thank you. Can we go back to the domestic water consumption statistics? I'm wondering why bumping up to a stage 1 is not having a positive effect on consumption. And should we not be more proactive and bump that process up a little bit more if we're not getting the desired results?
Thank you, Councilor. Yes, the difference between normal and stage 1 is not drastic enough to see the demand change. It isn't until I believe we get to stage 3 that we actually start to see a full reduction of what you can and cannot water. Stage 1 reduces your lawns, but doesn't reduce any other functions for which you use water on your property. So your planters, your gardens, etc., can still be used for your underground irrigation system. People are still allowing them to run everything else. It isn't until you get to that stage 3 point where we start to see noble water in the lawn and the reduction of usage for your planters and your gardens, etc. At that point, we may see that massive reduction in demand. Right now, we have not seen it. Policing is another avenue in which, unfortunately, I don't have the resources to send somebody out to police this, to make sure people are actually turning off their irrigation when they're supposed to be. With people with running underground irrigation, they do it at night, and I have nobody checking on that. We see our massive demand between about 4 in the morning and about 8 in the morning, is when we see the massive drop off. So unless I've got somebody going out 4 in the morning and checking and see who's got their underground going and who doesn't, it's pretty hard to curb those people.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, your comment about the domestic water consumption. I'm not sure exactly the wording that you used, but it sounded pretty obvious to me that our demand is high and we would have concerns about it. Should this, I guess more directly, my question is, should we not be proactive and do that right away to help solve that problem?
To answer your question, yes. It comes down to, again, a resource requirement for this department to engage the public, to enforce these requirements on the public, to ensure that, people are actually not using the underground sprinkler systems early in the morning every day. Without somebody going around and actually knocking on your door and saying, so what you doing and why are you doing it? It's hard to have people understand that their water consumption has a major impact on water production. I agree wholeheartedly. I love to get ahead of the curve on this. I would love to be able to deal with this. This is a perfect avenue in which metering comes into play, and we say, okay, we see your meter spinning, we're just sending you the fine. Right now, there's no way of us determining that they're using excessive amounts of water. It's really hard to say to neighbor A, to neighbor B is getting away with watering his lawn all day, every day, and neighbor A is abiding by it. But we have no way of stick handling neighbor B. So
I guess my comment would be is if we bump it up, we would get compliance from a certain percentage of people that would help the consumption. That's what my comment was kind of.
no, I appreciate that.
So I think that there's a lot of people that are watering their lawns. I mean, you look today, or yesterday, Monday, nobody should be watering their lawns or doing that type of thing. And yet people are. I'm not stopping to say to them, because that's not my job, but I know that I've heard from several people. When I go out for my walk, I see this and this and this. So either they know about it and they're choosing to ignore it, or they don't know that they should be doing something different. And I think sometimes people don't read if they're not on our e-news, I think it was in the paper, some of them just ignore those things. And I think it's very hard to monitor. I agree with you. I don't know what we can do.
And water is going to become a very scarce commodity. It's going to become a very expensive commodity down the road.
Yes.
We need to start treating it that way. However, getting that message out to the general public is hard. North Americans believe that water is free.
Yeah.
They think that we've got such an abundance of water, we'll never have an issue. That's perfect example of the climate change that's happening right now with wildfires. Eventually, that's not going to be the case, and water is going to become the price of oil at some point in probably my history.
And also the lake level is continuing to go down a little bit. It's less than it usually is. It's usually at about 912 feet above sea level at this point, and it's been slowly going down, so it's about 911.60 right now. And that's concerning as well, because it's not obvious unless you have docks or a pipe out into the lake, and you're drawing water from it, and then you might notice it. But yeah, it's concerning for sure. Sorry, did you?
Yeah, I did have a question. I guess I see the big increase in domestic water. Is Well 8, can you refresh my mind where Well 8 is,
Well, 8 is
roughly speaking?
down by Kingfisher, right on the water.
Where?
Kingfisher Drive right on the water. So as you're coming off of Highway 3, Well 8 is that small little building on the lake access road, just as you're heading east or west on Kingfisher.
So it's about
It's about 3 or 4
blocks
houses in.
away from the
Yeah.
bridge.
Oh, okay, so it's the big increase was that people like downtown and using all the water. The whole-
Well, no, because Our wells feed the entire distribution
Oh, I
system.
see.
They aren't specific to each side of the community.
Oh, I
So when we see demand increase, the wells subsequently come on. We try to leave well 8 off as
Oh, I see.
an
Just
additional
used to be-
thing. So all of a sudden now our demands are so
Uh-huh.
high, wells 8 kicking in and providing water.
But it looks like most of the other wells were actually down between June and July, except
Because-
for 8.
It's because well 8's come on,
Oh, they,
those run times come down a bit.
okay,
And as we start to play with our wells to try to
even out.
even them out and mitigate some of the demand, you're gonna
Yeah.
start to see things even out. We're gonna see them running more, all of them. Instead of usually we see spikes in 3 and 1 because they're our preferred wells. So they may run up to 24 hours a day.
Is that a concern?
It is, well, 1, we have had issues with aquifer and recharge rates. And we have had to take well 1 offline because the aquifer can't recharge the wellhead. Because demands are so high and so continuous. We're trying to run well 4 and 5 a little bit more. They're a higher production well. However, our water quality isn't as good. So it's a juggling game with how we deal with our domestic system. So unfortunately, we don't have pristine water in a great abundance of aquifer recharge here.
And one other little question on at 85th Street, if you had a major issue with all your umbrellas kind of disappeared, or are they just not going
We had a couple of wind events, Councillor King, and they snapped and that was it. They came out.
Oh, is
So
that big wind?
at $400 a pop, we weren't gonna go and be purchasing anymore. So as we look to design that as a permanent fixture, again, we'll look at a tree canopy, we'll look at some sort of sail structure or provide some shade in that area.
But it is coming down this fall.
It is
correct?
coming down this fall, that is correct.
Does it have to, or is there the option of not having it come down? It
There's
depends.
the option, your worship, of it not coming down, and we wait to design a permanent fixture in that location.
I think the hot weather and the smoke has reduced the number of people who actually go out there.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, I think the spring and the fall and even Christmas activities would be, that would be a great place to continue. So I hope that the thought of leaving that as a permanent location is seriously looked at, because I think the middle of summer, whether you have umbrellas or not, it's kind of in between buildings and it is a bit too hot, I'm sure. Although the ice cream Scoopies, they I think must have done a good business, because you quite often see people eating ice cream out there. So anyway, it's been a noted positive addition to the town, I think, and lots of people have been quite happy with seeing that. So I hope it continues. Any other questions of Mr. Brownstein? No? Okay, then thank you very much, Mr. Brownstein. And I think that we are at the end of the committee of the whole meeting. So could I please have a motion to terminate the meeting? Councillor King, Councillor Bennett,